Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, a new project for 2025. I'm going to be buddy reading with my dad his 12 favourite books. I think everyone has in their life a single person they could point to and say that person is the biggest influence on me as a reader. And for me, it's my dad. When I was growing up, I remember my dad always had a book to hand, always had a book nearby that he could pick up and read when he had a few spare moments. And those books were invariably tatty paperbacks, sometimes ones he'd owned for ages, sometimes ones he bought recently, but usually secondhand. And they were usually books that were read purely for pleasure. Books that were read for enjoyment rather than betterment. And I think that is the single biggest influence on me as a reader, is the fact that, as a reader, I read for fun. I read to enjoy myself. I read to escape. I don't necessarily read to make myself a better person. I read because it's a really, really enjoyable hobby. And that's something I definitely got from my dad. And I also, to an extent, got some of my taste in books from my dad as well. Now, my taste definitely leans towards kind of darker stuff. My dad is not a big horror reader, for example, but the idea of kind of suspenseful, enjoyable, gripping fiction is definitely something that he enjoys as well. So we've been talking over the last few weeks about the idea of doing this project where we buddy read his 12 favourite books. And this started because he'd watched one of my videos where I talked about some of my favourite books, and he sent me his top 10. Now, he said to me in that email that actually it was really difficult to just come up with 10. It would have been much easier to send 12. So I said, well, why don't you send me the 12 and we can read one a month throughout 2025. We'll buddy read them together and then we can share our thoughts with each other, and I can share those thoughts with all of you. So 12 books to go through, and it wasn't quite the list that I was expecting. There are a couple of omissions, a couple of books I would have expected to see on the list that aren't there. Those are Foundation by Isaac Asimov. So my dad is a huge sci-fi fan and a really big fan of Asimov, so I did expect to see some Asimov there. And the other book I expected to see was Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes, which is another book I know had a big impact on my dad, and it's a book I love as well. So neither of those books are on here. 12 books. It's definitely quite a dad list, shall we say. You'll see when I go through it. There are some books you may not expect to be on there, but there are definitely books of a type that I would label as dad books. So my dad is in his late 70s now. And these are the kind of books you can imagine, or of these books, the kind of books you can imagine a 70-year-old guy enjoying. So let me go through them. Before I do though, so let me give you a quick summary. So there are 3 books on this list from a single author. But neither of them are his 2 best known books. So that author is Nevil Shute. I'll get to what the books are in a moment. But the 2 books you'd expect probably to see from Nevil Shute on a list like this are A Town Like Alice and On the Beach, which I think are his 2 best known books. So neither of those books are on the list, but there are 3 Nevil Shute books. He's the only author who appears more than once. There are 2 books that I've read before, and I'll flag those to you when I go through the list so you know which ones those are. And there are 4 books by authors that I've read, but I haven't read the book that's on the list. So 4 other books by authors that I've read previously and enjoyed previously, I have to say, in all cases. And 7 of these books, and this is where we get into the it being a dad list part, 7 of the books are what I would consider to be thrillers. And when I say thrillers, I mean like the old school definition of thriller, so kind of action, espionage, suspense type books. So 7 of those. So let me go through the list with you, and for each book Dad has provided a kind of very brief summary of what it's about, and we're going to read these books in the order that he thinks he initially read them. So his memory of when he read these books in his life is what informs the order of this list. So the first book we're going to read is Manalive by K Chesterton. So K Chesterton is an author I've read, so I've read some of the Father Brown stories and really enjoyed those, but I haven't read Manalive. And in common with all of the books on this list, I can remember my dad praising these books to me in the past. So this isn't a list he's just come up with. This is a list he's been thinking about for a while, I think. These are definitely all books that I remember him having loved and spoken to me about in the past. So Dad's description of Manalive, which I think from what he's told me about the book is a slightly misleading description, but deliberately so, is Man Preys on Unmarried Women. Okay, the next book then is the first of the Nevil Shute books. So Nevil Shute is an author, is one of the four authors like Chesterton that I've read before. So I've read A Town Like Alice by Nevil Shute and one other, the name of which now escapes me. But yeah, I've read a couple of Nevil Shute books before. I really enjoyed both of them. So the first of the Nevil Shute books we're going to read is An Old Captivity. And Dad's description of that is Air Expedition and Vikings, which definitely sounds appealing. The next book is another Nevil Shute book. That is Round the Bend, which is, I think I'm right in saying, is my dad's favourite Nevil Shute book. So his description of that is Airplanes, Religion and Tolerance. Next we have the first of the thrillers on the list. So this is again one I remember him telling me about. It's a book about a yacht race. So it's Challenge by Warwick Collins. So this is a book that I think is out of print. And indeed, when I tried to find an image to put in the video, the only image I can find online of this book is this one, which is just a photo someone's taken of the book. So not like a proper cropped cover image of the book. I could have cropped it myself, but I thought I'd use this to show you kind of how forgotten I guess this book is. So this is a book that I think came out in the 80s, but clearly one that just nobody remembers anymore. And that's one of the things I love about this list is it's going to encourage me to read books that I just wouldn't have read otherwise, and that probably a lot of people watching won't have heard of. Do let me know in the comments when I get to the end of this list if you've heard of all of the books that I'm going to talk about. So yes, Dad's description for that one is US versus Russia yacht race. Next up we have another one that I haven't read, The Dancing Men by Duncan. So Duncan, a very successful British kind of thriller writer. Dad's a big fan of Duncan. I don't think I've read anything by Carl in the past. So his description for this one is Genealogy and US presidential politics. So maybe quite a topical one to be reading in 2025 with a new president about to go into the White House. Next up then we have one of the two books I have read, and in fact I read this fairly recently. So this is an author I was expecting to see on the list. It's Robert A. Heinlein, and the book is The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. So I'll be honest, I didn't love this when I read it. It's about a lunar colony and kind of politics on that colony. So the colony trying to kind of break free of the control of Earth. So definitely quite a political book, and Heinlein was quite a political writer. So Dad's description of that is Lunar Living and Revolution. Next then we have the third Nevil Shute book, which is Trustee from the Toolroom. And Dad's description for this is middle-aged model maker goes on a quest. So one of the things I didn't tell you about my dad is he's a big model maker. He loves making models of boats in particular, trains as well. So yeah, no surprise that he was attracted to a book about a model maker. Okay, next up we have another thriller, and another kind of forgotten thriller. I think this one is still in print. I think it's the first in a series, but certainly not a book I've ever heard anyone talk about on BookTube. That is Choosers of the Slain by James Cobb. So Dad's description of this one is US Navy in an Antarctic war. So that sounds fun. I used to read loads of books like this. I used to be like a big Tom Clancy fan, but I haven't read anything of this sort for a while. So really am looking forward to reading some good old-fashioned techno thrillers again. Next up then, the second book from the list that I've read. So this is Airframe by Michael Crichton. So one of Crichton's later books, certainly came after Jurassic Park, about an investigation, as I remember it, into an air crash. I remember it being a really good one. I remember in particular the descriptions of the kind of aircraft hangars where aircraft are made being really fascinating. So Crichton always added a bit of kind of interesting detail, I think, into his books. I think that's one of the reasons, one of the things that attracts my dad to his books is he loves that kind of technical detail. So yeah, looking forward to rereading this one. Remember it being very good. So Dad's description of this one is Aviation Accident Investigation. Okay, next we have another book that I would say is probably a forgotten book, another techno thriller, a big, thick techno thriller, which originally I think came out in the 80s. Again, I think this one is part of a series from someone who was kind of, I guess, a competitor to Tom Clancy, one of those other writers that came to prominence off the back of Tom Clancy's success. So this is Protect and Defend by Eric Harry. My dad's description of this one is NATO versus China war. So, given tensions at the moment between the US and China, hopefully this won't turn out to be too prescient. Next then, we have another thriller, another one by an author I haven't read, I think a British author. So this is Long Reach by Mike Lunnon-Wood. And Dad's description for this one is Thin Red Line in Belize. So I think this is about an attack on Belize or something like that. So should be a fun read anyway. And then the final one is one by an author I've read before, albeit I haven't read this book. That author is Stephen Leather. So Stephen Leather, a British thriller writer, somewhat notorious because he made some slightly unguarded remarks at a literary festival a few years ago that a lot of other writers jumped on and criticised him for, which were basically around the fact that he would go on to places like Goodreads. I'm not sure if Goodreads existed at the time, but would go on to like places where people were discussing books and create fake accounts and praise his own books through those accounts. So a slightly controversial figure perhaps, but a decent thriller writer from what I remember. So the book we're going to read by Stephen Leather is The Bomb Maker, and Dad's description for that is a big terrorist bomb in London. So again, sounds like an entertaining, thrilling read. So those are the 12 books I'm going to be reading with my dad, one per month. We're going to start in January with Manalive. Feel free to read along with us should you want to. And each month, I'll report back on my thoughts on the book, and I'm also going to get my dad's thoughts to share with you as well on kind of his experience of rereading the book. Now, whether or not he'll ever make a live video performance on the channel remains to be seen. We may discuss that in the future. Maybe I'll get him to come on for a couple of episodes and discuss the book that we've read. But yeah, those are the 12 books. Do let me know in the comments what you think of the project, what you think of the books. Hopefully you'll enjoy kind of watching along throughout the year as I go on this kind of extended buddy read with my dad. Really looking forward to it. Anyway, I will leave it there and say, as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.